everybody. Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Ricky Camilleri. Our next guest restaurants have a total of 16 Michelin stars. It's incredible. He's also the producer, host, presenter, judge of more shows than I think television can produce at one time. And he's got another one, Gordon Ramsay's 24 Hours to Hell and Back, where he and his team head across the country and attempt to save some truly destitute restaurants. Let's take a look.
You know, Mississippi prides itself on warmth and making you feel special. Well, you certainly didn't make me feel special today, let me tell you.
It's time for a change, but I don't know how to change it.
Oh, now you're denouncing responsibility. That's spineless. $28 for a bland gravy. Did you taste that gravy?
I did not.
You're the first chef I've met in my life that doesn't taste his own food. Oh, my God. Nicole, you're second in charge of that menu, right?
Yeah.
You go online, right, and you read some of these reviews.
I really don't read them because I can imagine what people say about stuff.
Let me read out a couple, shall we? 1 star out of 5. Ordered the lasagna, and it was frozen in the middle. It was like reheated from the microwave. Do we put lasagna in the microwave?
That's how they heat it up. Yeah.
Yes.
Tell me what we do in the microwave.
Lasagna, we heat the gumbo and soup and...
Soups and sauces, ribs,
What else?
The salmon, the grilled asparagus.
Half chicken.
half of chickens, yeah.
Me.
Everybody, please welcome the great Gordon Ramsay. Hey,
Good to see you.
good to see you.
Likewise.
Welcome back.
So happy to be back. Literally landed just under 2 hours ago from London this morning. So
Well, you on a little vacation, right?
I was
A little one?
3 days. Every year we take 3 days out, head up to the mountains in Reykjavik. Young cooks, young waiters, and we just sit and think about not becoming stale, how to become the next best thing, and move things on. We have no phone reception, so no one can contact us. And then we catch these amazing salmon that are literally hours in from the Atlantic Ocean, making their way upstream. We catch, we release, and it's just that one time a year where you can just sit and think, breathe, and just relax.
Do you try to, we're going to talk about the show, obviously, but I'm kind of curious about a retreat like that. Do you try to find conversations that help push you and your team to the next level, or do you try to just let that 3 days breathe and see what comes out of it, and if nothing comes out of it, that's okay?
Yeah, good question. A bit of both, really. I'm all about innovation. How to become, the next best thing. Love that word perfection, but how do we move on from there? And then making them understand that customers vote with their feet. And the choices today, whether we're here in New York or Paris or London, it's apparent. And so customers are king. And I make them less complacent, but help them feel how important they are, almost as a commodity and what they need to do as a balance of this business today, because it's ruthless.
Well, speaking of ruthless, let's talk about 24 Hours to Hell and Back and how you have to deal with some of these destitute restaurants, some of them really doing poorly. And I think like any other good kind of makeover show, you find where someone is not just failing as a restaurant owner, but as a person in their life at that moment. And that's the button that you really push. Was that something that was important to you going into doing the show, that you weren't just making over a restaurant, you were also making over the internal?
Yeah. Restaurants are run on characters, and it's about that person, that individuality. But for me, it was about getting straight to the heart, the crux of the problem. No smokescreen, no BS, and just give me the negatives. 24 hours, may not seem enough time, but I mean, that's 3 days in a normal working life. And we do literally go around the clock in 24 hours. And sometimes it's not just about the food, it's the broken relationships, the fractured relationships, in comparison to the ignorance of them ignoring their families or not getting on with their sisters or ignoring their daughters.
There's been a death in the family sometimes. There's been infidelity that has caused a fair amount of depression. Yeah.
And then it's making them understand that this business is notorious, and so you need to get on top of every little thing. And it's not about being overbearing and over-controlling. It's about admitting your weaknesses and then improving your strengths. And so the psychology behind it is insane. And as you know, we have an amazing team, from an art team to a culinary team. And so I know I front the show, but the amount of research, Ricky, and the amount of investment that goes in behind the scenes to make these guys and girls successful is extraordinary.
There's really a philosophy behind the idea that you can get over a fair amount of trauma through through working hard and persevering a little bit. You know, that doesn't mean you should deny your trauma, but oftentimes what it seems like you're dealing with characters are people who are allowing the trauma to overweigh what they could be doing with their lives.
Yeah, and also not spotting your mistakes and being honest about those mistakes. So when you start sending food that you know is not top notch, and you think the customer can't identify the weakness in that, and you say, send it, they don't know the difference, that's the time to stop. I've seen great chefs, not only here in New York, but globally, that have been taken down by critics, and not even 10% of the problems these restaurants have experienced. So when I see young chefs, you know, disappearing off the radar because of a critic from the New York Times, I think of what I discover, you know, and the mess and the set in the kitchen on these kind of shows, it's shocking. So I get a little bit pissed off.
Have you ever found yourself in a position like that as a chef, or even as an entertainer, as someone who has a company, where you found yourself to get a little complacent, or something has happened that has forced you into a kind of complacency and you needed somebody else to kick your ass a little bit?
No, we have an amazing setup, and we have done over the last 7 years now, mystery shoppers. So, you know, there's a percentage of chefs in today's world that absolutely detest that viral content from a blogger, vlogger, or, you know, a foodie that isn't even a professional, that just wants to voice their opinion. I welcome that. I welcome that, because that, for me, is music to my ears, because we have instant feedback. I could be sat on the outskirts of Barcelona, and someone could be sat in my restaurant in Vegas having the most amazing, you know, rib cap. And I could see the picture, I could see the decor, I could see the temperature of the steak the minute it cut into it. So the setup now, every week, without fail, we have at least 2 mystery shoppers in our restaurants. And then we purposely create mistakes. What happens when we knock a glass champagne over? What happens when we send the food back and it is cooked perfectly? What's the reaction from the maitre d'? What do the chefs think? Do they taste it? So, no, we've got an amazing setup now that sort of helps maintain that standard and keep me and my team on our toes.
And that you just always want to be on your toes. You've never found yourself personally falling off your toes a little bit, falling on your heels?
God, I mean, this September we celebrate 20 years at Restaurant Gordon Ramsay.
Yeah.
And so 20 years, 1998, I had to convince my wife to sell our house. I had to come up with a deposit of £300,000 to convince the bank to lend me £200,000. I needed £500,000 equity to buy a lease of 5 years, which had no longevity. But I was desperate to open up my own restaurant. So 20 years on, I'm still hungry. Yeah. 17 years recipient of 3 Michelin stars. We closed down the Restaurant Gordon Ramsay this year and transformed the kitchen into a Rolls Royce of a setup. I mean, just beautiful. I mean, I never could ever dream of perfecting a kitchen like that. It's only based on the success over the last 20 years. We can put everything into that layout. So I feel
like the type of person who is so hungry to open a restaurant that they will convince people for loans, and they never stop being hungry.
Yeah, and also I think that level of perfection, I think it's in your DNA. Yeah. And so I need that kind of pressure. I thrive on pressure. I think it's healthy. I think it's an amazing position to be in. But also the soundbite from that is the talent that's coming through there, and what's produced inside that kitchen, and seeing those young figureheads go on, you know, outside of my umbrella and become, you know, as big or even bigger. So I think I've got a responsibility on my shoulders to produce that kind of talent, because there's a very unselfish teaching method from some of the great chefs I work with. And they were tough, firm, fair, but my God, did they give me a lot. And so I'm not in the kitchen 16 hours a day. I've been in that position. I've been behind that line. And my job now is to conduct, perfect, and enhance. Also, I don't want them dependent on me. I'm going to give them everything I've got, just like my chefs did. But then I want to see a little bit of them in me. I want to see them, you know, take 35, 40% of what I've shown away. I want to see them on the plate. So it's a really nice sort of 360 turnaround when you start seeing that level of confidence rise, and then, you know, they start becoming individual little, you know, talented monsters.
Hey, I got an idea for a restaurant. What do you think?
Well, just the make or break, as you know, 65% of restaurants close in the first 18 months of business anyway. So I say, if you're going to put this in now and work your ass off, do it properly. You know, get to the very top, because it's a great position to be in. But understand, you know, you need to be consistent.
Well, let's talk about the chefs that you're dealing with on 24 Hours to Hell and Back. Some of them are really struggling. Chefs and owners, they're fighting with each other. The chefs are uninterested in really being there. Some of them don't even have the tools to really be in the kitchen. In one episode that we've seen this season, someone gets fired in the episode. What was it like being a part of that?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, I have to look at the sort of analogy against sport. If you're not good enough to be in that team and you can't cut it at that level, then you should not be playing. So when you start feeling sorry for members of staff and you worry about their sort of their position and you become a best friend with them, it's the worst ever position to be in, especially in our business, because you cover up their mistakes. You don't identify their vulnerability and they start literally taking advantage of your kindness. So firing
without even realizing it, people do that.
Yeah, but firing people is important. Important to maintain the standards. And I ask my team every day, if you own this business and that was your house that got sold and it was your money that bought those produce coming through the door in the morning, would you do that the same way? Would you throw that away? Would you show that level of disrespect? So there's nothing wrong in firing people that can't cut the mustard. It's bloody worse employing a mistake that when your back's turned, the standards are running out of the door, and you spent 10, 15 years building the reputation of this business. It can be lost in 10 or 15 days, especially with a chef, female or male, that's not maintaining what you've taught them.
Do you wish you had more time than 24 hours with some of these restaurants? It does really feel when you're watching the show that the team may not be able to get it together with some of these restaurants because things are so out of sorts with the staff and with the sort of physical, the way that the restaurant looks and everything going on inside. Do you ever worry that you're actually not going to make it?
Mm-hmm. There's so much goes into a 24-hour period. My culinary team are huge. I mean, they are some of the best chefs that I've ever worked with. So there's an aftermath that we leave with them. For me, it was about giving that oxygen to the business, basically because it may only have 24, 36 hours to survive anyway. So yeah, in a perfect world, I think I could stretch that out to 2 or 3 days. But then they get very familiar with what you're doing and how you're doing it. And all of a sudden, I try not to allow the TV part to become the substance of why I'm there. And that's a very hard juxtaposition to understand. So,
you mean in the sense that they would create kind of their own characters or start knowing how to interact with the camera a little bit more?
Or start talking down the barrel. I don't know if you've ever seen, but you've never seen me walk and talk down the barrel on any of these shows. It's shot like a documentary. So if I'm talking to a young cook and he turns around and addresses the camera and starts reeling off, that pisses me off as a dude. You've got it wrong. Right. You've got it so wrong. There's so much more going on here. If this fails, I look as stupid as you do. So listen, and I'm going to say it once. Then the area of that restaurant and what that restaurant has to do to look after that area and stop thinking beyond that area.
Especially if it fails after it airs. Because once this airs, people are going to go to New Orleans and go to the coffee pot while they're there because they're going to remember having seen it on the show.
That's right, but that's the most dangerous time, to be honest, because that's when they get flooded, they get fully booked, and I suppose
they might not be ready for that.
They might not be ready, but don't get greedy. Pace yourself. I always say it's a great feedback when you can't get into the restaurants. Book it for a week later or 2 weeks later. Don't cram in those reservations and take the cash. Pace yourself. So, listen, it's tough love. It's everything I've ever learned from Hotel Hell to Kitchen Nightmares, and it's one of the most requested sort of comebacks that I've ever contemplated. So, for me, I take it very serious. And of course, when it's successful, you don't get praise. When it closes down, you get the bloody blame. It's my fault.
I feel like one thing that you're very well known for is your tough love, your brand of tough love when you're dealing with chefs and when you're dealing with restaurants. But I do think within this show, it requires you to sort of tamper some of the tough love at times and recognize how people are feeling and actually deal with their feelings and help change them. What was that like for you?
Yeah, there's families involved. Yeah. There's families involved. Any of my kids want to come into the business, then go and work for another chef. Don't expect to come under my wing, because that's unfair on my team. Because if they make a mistake, I don't want my team thinking, oh shit, that's Gordon's son. We can't really tell him. So that's unfair. So I wouldn't do that to my own business. With these fractured setups on 24 Hours to Hell and Back, it's quite sad because they're so distant from their family, and yet they bring the problems home from the restaurant, and then when the family come to the restaurant, they put the problems on them at the table. So fix the family first, and then try to give them the remedy in order to understand that this restaurant, if this fails, the family's going to fail. So we got to make this work.
Do you find the way that you talk to chefs in the kitchen can sometimes work as well when you're talking to someone about how they're dealing with their personal life and dealing with their family?
I get really upset when I see that level of laziness and that level of complacency. But here's the thing, they've chose to be in this business. And so these businesses are on their ass, they're dying. And so all that BS about please be so kind to not defrost the shrimp in boiling water and leave them out for 3 days while the rats piss all over them. I'm going to get straight to the point. Also, the flip side of this, it's a very dangerous environment when you're not practicing how to cook properly. I don't know if you've seen some of the things we discovered, but I found a mouse in the toaster, and the waitress said to me that we don't use that side of the toaster. Is that a reason for the mouse to stay there rent-free for the last 3 months? It's shocking.
Well, that's when you scream at her, are you just waiting for someone to die?
But that can happen. That can seriously happen. So, that's the one downside to our business, that anybody can go and open a restaurant without the proper qualifications. To become a doctor, you got to go to medicine school for 8-10 years. A lawyer, you got to go to bar school for 8 to 10 years. People open restaurants now on the back of a bloody dinner party, at Thanksgiving, when they say, hey, Mary, Bill, your food's amazing. You should buy yourselves a restaurant and put this food into a restaurant. And they completely forget the importance of running a business as opposed to something that's going to massage their ego. Yeah. So any dinner parties out there that even remotely suggesting to open a restaurant, do a bloody pop-up for 48 hours and shut it down.
Right. You'll know if you want to do a restaurant after that.
Don't fall in love with being in a glamorous industry where you think it's all hunky-dory and rock and roll and it's going to make you rich and famous.
Anybody who thinks the restaurant industry is a glamorous industry is sorely mistaken on that end.
Yeah, but I think they get excited about the sort of attention and the drama and the sort of profile. Trust me, I see it a lot when, I say to, foodies that come into the restaurant, and one guy said to me last week, this is in Royal Hospital Road, he's 58 years of age, looking forward to retirement. And I said, come on then, you're traveling around the world, what are you doing? He said, no, I spent the last 3 years conceptualizing a restaurant. I said, what? You're coming into that amazing last third of your life, you're about to retire, and you're opening a restaurant. Okay. Why? And he said, well, I've been eating some of the best restaurants anywhere in the world.
Keep doing that. Keep eating in them.
I think I can do as well as. I'm like, OMG, are you kidding me?
Right. Do you ever worry about the effect that celebrity chefs or a celebrity chef like yourself has had on those that think about opening a restaurant and on becoming a chef? Because so much of the work and as much as the blood, sweat, and tears are in the shows, there's still a lot being cut out, and there's still a story being told in an hour with commercial breaks. People aren't getting the real full picture of the blood, sweat, and tears sometimes.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think you do get the essence in terms of what's happening. We set that place up with CCTV first, so we get the collateral damage already, so I can get straight to the problem. Unlike Nightmares, I'm on that low run of discovery and trying to search for problems. Here, I've got it. So every time there's an argument or a kickback, then I'm not there to argue. I'm going to listen to my advice. I'm here to help. And I don't think that destroys the industry. It's making it better, sharper, and more professional.
Absolutely. Let's get a question from our audience. Who has a question?
Hi, Gordon.
Hi.
2 quick questions. One, with all the TV shows that you do, how are you almost always in the same place at the same time? Like, because you're physically at those shows. So how do you do that? And my second question for you is, from discovering cooking at the age of 19 to the empire that you stand on now, what would you say is the sagest piece of advice that one of your mentors have given you? I know you've said that Guy Savoy is one of your mentors, so what's the wisest piece of advice?
Yes, really 2 very good questions. The answer to the first question, I'm full on. So unfortunately, I don't have many doubles that fill in for me, so I'm the real deal. But I put everything into it. And my life is structured that it's sort of organized 9, 12, 14 months in front. And so when I go into a project, it's absolutely 100% committed. So by the time you see that on air, I've done that 6 months ago. We've just finished the finale of MasterChef, literally 3 weeks ago. An extraordinary twist to the end, which was breathtaking. So I need to work in an organized setup because that's that level of perfection again. And then the best advice I've ever had from any chef was to travel. Once you've perfected something that you know that you're not learning anymore, get out and move on to another chef, move on to a different country. And you don't have to spend 12 months, 14 months in these places. Restaurants will take you in now for 2-3 months at a time. And so getting out your comfort zone, feeling vulnerable is the best position to be in as a young chef, because you've got to become a sponge. You've got to absorb knowledge. Everywhere you go, knowledge. And by doing that, it's going to shape your character and it's going to shape your own demeanor of how you perceive food. So I never like chefs getting comfortable. I have chefs around the world now that after being with me for 2 years, I personally kick them out because they need to go and see something else. A, to appreciate what they've just learned, but B, to come back well-rounded. Really, really seriously well-rounded. And then we have a grid, a GRID, called Where's Gordon Chefs? And every month we have between 6 and 12 young guys traveling the world. Last month they were in Scandinavia. We started off in Japan, and they come back for 6 weeks. And then we pay for the sabbatical. They go out again, and their minds, when they come back from Tsukiji Fish Market in Tokyo, and they come back from Scandinavia, and they've got these amazing ideas. It's great to see. So they've got the security, but they get the knowledge at the same time. So when you feel comfortable, time to feel uncomfortable, because that's the part that's shaping you. You don't get to be comfortable on the way up for 10 years and expect to become a success. There needs to be a little bit of a sort of, jeopardy. There's got to be a little bit of uncertainty. And then you need to find out about yourself. And the only way you find out about yourself, really, is when you get planted on your ass.
Do you still put your... Sorry, go ahead.
Different language, different culture, and it's really breathtaking.
Do you still put yourself in situations where you feel like you're challenged and that there's jeopardy of some kind?
Oh, I need that. Yeah, definitely, without a doubt. Yeah, also I think, I've never been complacent, ever. So I need that kind of stimulant to prevent me from getting, lazy. We've started a lot more tutorial online. Last year we launched that amazing masterclass, and we are blown away with the feedback globally, about this content of just pure, uninterrupted cooking in terms of techniques, sourcing ingredients, and then that level of creativity. And so, I get just excited now as I did 10 years ago, still doing that.
If you don't push yourself, do you find that you can get really lazy?
I'm watched 24/7. Everywhere I go, I'm under scrutiny, so people know that I'm, excited about, making a mark and hitting a standard. So I also think it's a great reflection on the kids. Having 4 kids today and seeing the kind of distractions that they're up against globally, social media, bullying and all that kind of stuff. Our twins were 18 recently, and whilst their mates were all getting iPads and cars, I bought them a ticket to run the London Marathon. And again, what it did for them, push themselves to go through 26 miles for a children's hospice, was extraordinary, because now they want to do it every year. And so it's just about keeping it real and not spoiling them.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get another question right here.
Hi.
Hi.
I just wanted to know, what's the best and worst dish that you ever created, in your opinion?
Wow, that's a good question. The best dish. Wow, that's a tough one, that one, because there's several, and I think it's about the moment. We were in Sardinia 3 weeks ago, and we braised this incredible, octopus, and it was just mind-blowing. And then I was in Napoli because I wanted to go back to where the first ever margherita pizza was born. And I had this incredible experience with this margherita, and then I made this fresh lemon curd with limoncello. And I put that on a pizza dough thinking, God, this chef's going to kick my ass. And it came out in a way that it was like this beautiful caramelized lemon curd on this sourdough. And it brought me back to sort of growing up with Mum. In the morning, toast and lemon curd was a big treat. Worst dish? That's a really good question. I wouldn't send it, but I've made something that I thought, oh, that's not quite right. And that was in Vietnam when I was working with one of the families on this floating, almost like this floating housing estate on the Mekong Delta going through, and they were harvesting crocodiles underneath. And I had this sort of crocodile tail, and I tried to do like a stroganoff. It was a disaster. Even the kids wouldn't eat it. Not good. When you see kids not eating food, you know it's bad. This was really bad.
Right here.
So throughout all the shows that you have, you're clearly a big inspiration to a bunch of people. What is one advice that you would give to some of the younger aspiring chefs and bakers?
That's a really good question. I think it's very tough today, especially with 3 girls myself. I disagree with everybody being judged on one exam, and if you don't get to a certain percentage of that exam, you're classed as not a bright spark. So that upsets me, because the pressure on these youngsters today is ridiculous. I didn't peak at 15, I certainly didn't peak at 12, and I certainly didn't peak at 18. So governed the way we are with these ridiculous SATs over here and GCSEs in the UK and A-levels, and if you get 3 A's, you get into a certain university, I think it's wrong to judge individuals on what you can achieve at that time in your life. So I see food as a canvas. I see food as a sort of a way of painting yourself on a plate and bringing the best out of that level of creativity and having no fear. Producing MasterChef Junior the way we have done over the last 7 years, and kids being made to feel inadequate because they can't study algebra or they don't understand how to spell Czechoslovakia by the time they're 10 is dreadful. The way they feel awkward in a classroom with some intelligent kids around them. So cooking is a great way of experimenting and developing a character. And cooking with no fear is amazing. So with my 3 girls, Megan, Tilly, and Holly, how old are you?
I'm 11.
11, amazing. So when they were like 7, we used to play a game, and it was a blindfold game where we would test things. So they'd put the blindfold on, and I'd put on the spoon, for instance, a sieved hard-boiled egg. And then we'd go straight to a piece of pear. Then we'd go straight to a little piece of Parmesan. So I taught them how to taste. And all of a sudden, what they started to understand is that they were developing their palate. And it's the same sort of way that we teach young cooks today. If you don't know what it tastes of, you shouldn't be cooking it. So we have this taste sort of competition about identifying flavors. And then we put 2 or 3 things on the spoon, and they understand the textures. So if I was 11 years of age, again, I wish my mum did that to me, because it's a great way of developing your senses and getting really smart with things you love. Once you know what it tastes like, then go and cook it and have some fun with it. So, yeah, you can even forget the blindfold. Just close your eyes and put some stuff on a spoon and develop that palate. Really important.
Helps you know why you're using ingredients too. Like say you're using a recipe or something.
What
you can be
works?
like, oh, this is going in here because it tastes like this and it's going to end up like this.
Absolutely. Also the fun. Baking, for instance. You know, baking's chemistry. So forget physics at school. If you can bake beautifully, sod the A+ in physics. Don't worry about that, because for me, you're a great baker, and that deserves an A+ if you bake beautifully, because baking is chemistry. When I first went to Paris, I started as a baker because I wanted to perfect bread. And then from the bread, it was the fougasse, and then from fougasse, it was the pain poilin. And I wanted to understand the chemistry. So I didn't do well at school, but I did well in cooking. And so I'm grateful for the way I was pushed. And I think pushing yourself from 11 is important.
I'm cursing in front of them. You're telling them to not worry about physics. This is great for the kids up here, isn't it, Gordon?
They know it's not they know it's a naughty word. And I get asked all the time, do you talk to the kids like that in the morning? Of course I don't. If they mess up, they're going to get told off. When they do things well, they get praised. And so I don't mean to curse. Unfortunately, it's just some of the idiots I have to work with that bring the best out of me. So it's not a smart thing to do, okay? But it is a great way to get straight to the point. But you've got another 10 years before you go there.
Gordon, I love the show. Congratulations, 24 Hours to Hell and Back. It's on Fox, right? And when is the next episode going to be on?
It's on a family called the Nimrods.
Really? What?
No, don't. They didn't name the restaurant the Nimrods, okay?
Oh, okay.
This place is extraordinary, and I'm just glad that they were back, where they should have been. And more importantly, when you see a couple like this that get taken advantage of an executive chef that has got 2 decades of experience. No, he had 2 decades of doing the same thing. And this couple bought this place and was over a barrel with a head chef that was almost putting a sort of gun to their head to say, you need me, otherwise this place is going to, disintegrate. So it was installing power to them and making them understand that they were good enough to run this without, a jumped-up chef that was costing them a fortune. So I did use a few naughty words on him. But when you'll see him, you'll understand why, okay? And I promise you now, I did mean it.
Gordon Ramsay, everybody. Let's hear it.